Hayden Panettiere just died at the age of 36, and something about this just does not feel right. And I don't want to make conspiracy theories about something like this, but it's kind of hard not to when just 3 weeks ago, she went on one of the biggest podcasts in the world, Jay Shetty, and she talked about a lot of the things that she went through. Part of that was the dark side of Hollywood.
So, for instance, she died at age 36. 3 6s, 666. That's already a telltale sign. If I go further, she's been on this earth 36 years, 360 days, another 36. She decided to do a podcast with a guy explaining how the industry really works for young actresses in the game. And she was on this podcast 3 months and 6 days ago.
You write about a moment in your career where a friend of yours takes you onto a boat. You're led to a room which has an older man in it, and then basically told to perform sexual acts and,
Oh, yeah. I was shocked. It took me by surprise. And it was led by somebody that I had grown to trust and see as...
This is exactly why I talk about Hollywood the way that I do. This is exactly why I talk about the stars or celebrities who are most obviously struggling. Like, this is why I talk about these spiritual topics concerning these young people, especially struggling in Hollywood, because they end up in caskets.
I've probably seen 20 different versions of this theory in the last couple of days. Hayden Panettiere finally starts talking openly about some of the things she experienced growing up in Hollywood, releases a memoir literally called A Reckoning, and less than 3 months later, she's dead at 36. Now, I need to be careful here because people online are making a much bigger claim than anything we can actually prove. Police have said they don't suspect foul play, and as I'm recording this, her official cause of death is still being investigated. So no, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Hollywood killed Hayden Panettiere. But here's where I started paying attention. Because when you actually go back and listen to what Hayden herself was saying before she died, about being a child inside this industry, about powerful people, about what adults around her exposed her to, and about how completely she says she lost herself in the process, suddenly I understood why so many people were going back through these interviews. And the question I kept coming back to wasn't who killed Hayden Panettiere, it was what exactly was Hayden Panettiere trying to tell us about Hollywood before she died? And that's the part I couldn't scroll past. I'm Micah, and you're watching Online Disciple. Let's get into the videos.
Hayden Panettiere just died at the age of 36, and something about this just does not feel right. And I don't want to make conspiracy theories about something like this, but it's kind of hard not to when just 3 weeks ago, she went on one of the biggest podcasts in the world, Jay Shetty, and she talked about a lot of the things that she went through. Part of that was the dark side of Hollywood. She explained this story where someone she trusted very closely at the time, they went on a yacht. She took her on a yacht, and this woman took her inside of a room, and there was a man there, a man she said people know very well. She didn't disclose his name. He wanted her to do things, and just take a look at this clip.
You write about a moment in your career where a friend of yours takes you onto a boat. You're led to a room which has an older man in it, and then basically told to perform sexual acts and,
Oh, yeah. Perspective completely shifted, and I realized that I was in danger. But by the time I'd realized I was in danger, I was quite literally out to sea. And it was that moment shook me and was shocking. And I was quite literally walked down, and I had been having a great time. There was no hints of anything like that happening. So it took me, I was shocked. It took me by surprise. And it was led by somebody that I had grown to trust and see as a protector and somebody who had my back. And to be walked down, down the stairs, and it was as like a surprise, presented as though it was like a surprise. And it was this very small room, and she physically put me in the bed next to this undressed man who was very famous and had his hands like this, like this was just, an average day for him. This is something that happens all the time. And I waited for her to leave. And I mean, that lion in me, that fire in me, my hair stood on end, and I became ferocious. I was like, this is not happening. But I had nowhere to hide. And I bolted, and I hid wherever I could think of to hide on a boat. There was no jumping off and swimming away, and there was nobody who was going to, I realized that there was nobody who was going to be empathetic to my situation, that this was nothing new to them.
See, I understand why people are making the connection. The timing alone is enough to make you look twice. And later on, we're actually going to get to something I find even stranger than the timing. But this clip from Jay Shetty is probably the biggest reason this theory has taken off. I mean, you just heard me play it. And I'm not going to pretend I can't see why somebody hears that and thinks, well, maybe there were people who didn't want her talking. Especially after everything the public has learned over the years about exploitation, powerful men, young women, and the way certain people inside the entertainment world were protected for a very long time. You hear a story like Hayden's now, and unfortunately, it doesn't even sound impossible anymore. I mean, you saw what happened with the Epstein case the last couple of years. But that's also where we have to separate "this makes me suspicious" from "this proves something happened." And by something happened, I mean someone physically did something to her. As of right now, authorities have said they found no signs of foul play. And her cause of death, I just came across this info now, by the way, is apparently an OD. But we all know someone could make anything look however they want, right? So I'm keeping that in the back of my mind while we watch these. Because if you thought that first guy was making connections, let's hear what some other people have to say. The theories are about to get considerably more unhinged.
Anytime a celebrity that most people feel that isn't problematic, that they favor or like or have a soft spot for, they always attach some righteous cause as to the reason why they died before their time. Now this one is, she was going to expose or do a movie about human trafficking or child trafficking. That is not true. A basic search would tell you that. They did the same thing about these other celebrities that you love and they pass away, like Avicii. Oh, he's going to do something to expose child trafficking and human trafficking. At the end of the day, these people signed up to be property. Somebody said that owned her, my pockets is getting light, so I need that insurance money on her life. And that's all it was. Insurance money. They see these people as numbers. If you so choose to be on this platform or on this stage and you leave it, just know you have a target strapped to your back. It doesn't matter how much money you made in an industry. It doesn't matter how big a splash you made in the industry. It don't matter. At the end of the day, you are currency. You're just a number. You're just numbers and letters. And it adds up to whatever narrative they want to push in front of you. So for instance, she died at age 36. 3 6s, 666. That's already a telltale sign. If I go further, she's been on this earth 36 years, 360 days, another 36. She decided to do a podcast with a guy explaining how the industry really works for young actresses in the game. And she was on this podcast 3 months and 6 days ago. Then she came out with a book called This Is Me, A Reckoning. If you look up the definition of reckoning, it means to estimate or calculate a cost of something. That's what it means. So her entire life, from the beginning she got into that industry to the time she left it, has been about numerology. Because that book was released 2 months and 28 days till her passing. And she passed away on the 220th day of the year. This is the game they play with people who are in the industry.
Okay, before we move on, there's something in that clip I want to talk about, because this is where I think the conversation starts getting really uncomfortable. Not necessarily because I believe every conclusion he's drawing, but because the idea underneath it isn't completely foreign to what we already know about entertainment. We've heard artists talk for years about contracts they barely understood, losing control of their work, being treated like products, and realizing way too late that the people around them were making decisions based on what they were worth financially. So when somebody takes that reality and pushes it into a much darker theory about what happens when a celebrity is no longer useful, I can understand how people get there. That doesn't necessarily make the theory true, but it does explain why it lands. But the part that really made me stop was the numerology. Hayden dying at 36, people immediately connecting that to 3 sixes, and then all the other symbols they start pulling into the conversation. Now, obviously, 36 is not literally 666, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that a number by itself proves anything. But this is where I struggle with the people who say, not everything is a conspiracy, because fine, I agree, not everything is. But why does it feel like whenever something like this happens, there's always some strange layer attached to it? A number, an image, an old performance, a weird interview, a symbol that suddenly gets brought back up. And maybe that's just what happens when millions of people start looking at the same tragedy and trying to find meaning in it. I can accept that explanation, but I also think it's fair to ask why these stories almost never stay ordinary for very long. There's always something that makes people go, wait, what is that? And if you think people are just seeing patterns that aren't there, I genuinely want to hear that argument too, because this is exactly where I'm trying not to force a conclusion. But let's hear another take, because the next person goes in a completely different direction.
This is exactly why I talk about Hollywood the way that I do. This is exactly why I talk about the stars or celebrities who are most obviously struggling. Like, this is why I talk about these spiritual topics concerning these young people, especially struggling in Hollywood, because they end up in caskets so often, so early, and I'm tired. Now, we know that she has been struggling with opioid addictions and such, and that could be the very cause of this death. But also Hayden talked about how she was abused and put in these terrible predicaments by Hollywood or industry producers in Hollywood. And she talked about it just 3 months ago in an interview. And her memoir just came out exposing a lot of this stuff. And now she's gone. I mean, it could have been a setup because of that, or it could be just the fact that she has been so overwhelmed with all the trauma and has been struggling internally in so many ways that these drugs have been her way out, her escape, and her soothing method. And it's led her to this point of death. So whether it's one reason that she's gone or the other reason, it's all had some sort of play. Plus, I did hear about her brother passing some years ago and how that was hard on her. I just watched that interview. Earlier this year, I just watched her interview and I was like so sad for her. Only to see that she's now gone, I couldn't believe the headlines. Like, it just did not seem real. She was my childhood on top of that. Like, I was just watching an episode with her on Malcolm in the Middle recently. Like, she was on so many things. Like, I just can't believe she's gone. But this is why I say, if you want to be a star, if you want to be a big actress or a singer or whatever the case may be, you have to be careful with how you handle the things that come at you in order to gain that success. You have to be careful. And sometimes life is just unfair because these kids' parents sell them out too. It's so unfortunate, and I hate to see this so much, but it just goes to show you that it is such a battle, but not a physical battle. Like I said before, it's a spiritual battle. We are not just fighting against flesh and blood, but also against spiritual wickedness. And in Hollywood, in the industry, it is so much wickedness. And it's crazy how these people are losing themselves coming out of the industry like this and dying so young. Like, it's such a pattern. It makes no sense. And it's so scary to see, especially having people in my family in Hollywood. It's like I have to pray for them so much because I want them to be safe. Okay? Because it's a monster. I just pray that her soul left peacefully from this earth. I really hope. Probably the saddest news I've heard this year concerning any celebrity or the industry. I'm tired. This is beyond.
Okay, this is where the conversation gets a lot deeper for me. I think this creator touched on the part of Hayden's story that might actually bother me the most. Before Hollywood, before the contracts, before any of these theories, you're talking about children being placed into an adult industry by the very people who are supposed to protect them. Hayden was working from an incredibly young age, and when you hear some former child stars describe what they were exposed to, you really do have to ask how many adults around them were looking at a child and how many were looking at an opportunity. Money can make people justify some unbelievably ugly things, especially when the person paying the price isn't them. I don't think everything happening in Hollywood can be understood purely through fame, money, and contracts. I believe there is a spiritual component to some of this. And I know somebody watching is probably rolling their eyes already, but at this point, you don't even have to be Christian to look at some of the imagery coming out of entertainment and admit that it gets extremely dark. Demonic imagery, mock rituals, occult symbolism, performances deliberately designed around things most cultures historically associated with darkness, eventually saying it's just art, stops answering every question. Now, that doesn't mean every artist is involved in something satanic, and it definitely doesn't mean every celebrity death is some kind of ritual. I don't believe we should make that leap. Christians are called to be light in the world, not to abandon every industry where darkness exists. The problem, at least the way I see it, begins when success starts requiring agreements that compromise who you are, what you believe, or what you're willing to participate in. And I don't only mean literal contracts on paper. Sometimes people make agreements with environments, lifestyles, and people that slowly pull them somewhere they never intended to go. That's why Hayden's story is tragic regardless of which theory you believe. A woman who entered this world incredibly young spent years describing addiction, exploitation, broken trust, and the feeling that she had lost control of her own life. Whatever ultimately caused her death, there is something here worth learning from, especially for parents who look at fame and see opportunity before they see the kind of environment they may be sending their child into. As for all the theories we've watched today, I'm still separating what we actually know from what people online believe happened. But I'm curious where you land. Do you think people are connecting dots that simply aren't connected? Or do you think there's something much darker underneath all of this? Allegedly, of course. Let me know what you think below. I'm Micah, this is Online Disciple, and I'll see you in the next video.